Entertaining, informative, and educational. Inspiring content that makes a difference.
This is the Maximus Troy Publications Broadcasting Network.
Join the Academy. The Breeders' Academy proudly presents Bred to Perfection with Kenny Troiano, a show for serious breeders.
Whether you are looking to create a new strain or simply improve an old one, you have come to the right place.
Daddy, I want more chickens.
Oh, boy.
Now, here's your host, Kenny Troiano.
Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Bred to Perfection. My name is Kenny Troiano, and this, my friends, is the podcast devoted to helping you become a better breeder and taking your strain to the next level. That's right, my friends. It doesn't matter if you are brand new to breeding or you've been breeding for many years. There is something all of us can do to improve our fowl for future generations.
We may be in the chicken business yet.
Okay, welcome to another episode of Bred to Perfection. I'm your host, Kenny Troiano, and I'm here with Peter Brown, known as the Chicken Doctor. Peter Brown's going to talk to us about mycoplasma. Before we get going, I want to talk about the Breeders' Academy. I'd like to encourage you to join me there where I can teach you how to create strains, improve strains, maintain your strains. You might have noticed if you go to the YouTube channel, we'll keep the most recent shows on YouTube, but the archive of shows will only be on the Breeders' Academy. You'll be able to watch the show for a couple weeks. After that, you're going to have to go to the Breeders' Academy to watch the archive. But you'll get the complete collection of podcasts and live shows. We have the podcasts on Mondays. We have a lot of good information. We have experts like Peter Brown and Dr. Gallardo. Always looking for someone who can contribute to the show and give really good information. Also, join our newsletter, the Breeders' Bulletin. There you're going to get some great tips, information, free bonus material, and free ebooks. And it's free. Everything's free. How you doing, Peter? What's going on with you?
Doing pretty good. Motoring along, keeping out of the way.
Start talking a little bit about mycoplasmosis and maybe a little bit of CRD. This is one of those diseases that I think a lot of people, they misunderstand. They don't really understand how it works, how it's passed. They think that everybody has it and that it's just one of those things that they have to live with. So they don't really work very hard to prevent it, cure it. So we're going to see if we can dig deep into this and pick Peter's brain a little bit on this particular disease. Maybe help people understand it a little bit better. My knowledge, Peter, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is it's a disease that's passed through the egg.
Primarily.
Which I look at as almost a breeder's disease because it's something that I think you want to prevent as much as possible because it can cause all kinds of problems in your yard. It's a very chronic disease. And my understanding is that if it affects one bird, it's pretty much going to affect all your birds on your farm, that it's fairly ubiquitous and that there's no cure. So I'm going to let Peter start there.
Well, it is passed through the egg. There isn't any question about that. That's long been known, but it doesn't mean that every bird be hatched out that's going to be positive. Hard to say what the percentage is. I've never looked at the percentage, but we know that not every bird is infected because the mating pair would have to have an active infection going on in order to pass it. If they were vaccinated, they would pass or shed less of it. So you'd still have less infected eggs coming through. You can't tell by looking at them. You can only tell after you've incubated them and hatched them out. I mean, even then, it doesn't show itself right away. It's not a disease that manifests itself very quickly. It's actually very slow. Probably talk about this part of it later, but basically brought out by stress seems to be the number one provoker of the disease, so to speak. And that's normal for a lot of other diseases. Sometimes they'll lay there. Canker's one. It'll just hang around and be dormant until something disturbs it, and then it's off to the races. But not all birds are infected at one given time, and some of that may be natural resistance. Some of it may be that the bird is a lot healthier overall. And I think here's a good jumping off point to start with talking about the bird's immune system because it plays a large role in the effectiveness of any program that you start, whether it's for coccidiosis, whether it's for coryza, infectious bronchitis, whatever. It really doesn't matter. If the gut is not in good shape, the immune system is not in good shape because about 70%, give or take, of the bird's immune cells reside in the gut. So worms, coccidiosis, enteritis, and things that are caused by stress and other disease organisms, certainly don't lend themselves well to a healthy bird. And then you're either going to vaccinate or you're going to medicate, and you're going to ask that immune system to give you a hand. It's not going to more than likely do the job that you want it to do. I think you clean up your act first. Make sure you don't have problems with coccidiosis. Make sure you don't have problems with worms. That doesn't mean you have to run out after the program and worm every bird on your place, which I don't believe in. Be cognizant of what's going on in your flock. You just can't look at how things spread, because it's a key factor in most cases, whether it's a bacteria or a virus, and they just don't spread the same. For instance, if you look at mycoplasma, they call it a mycoplasmal bacteria, and what that means is it's small, and it's smaller than a virus. And it also means that it doesn't have a cell wall, so its ability to spread outside the bird's body is more difficult. It's easier to disinfect against because it has nothing to protect it. Cell wall usually protects it. So from that standpoint, there's a few things you can do. Disinfect often, that you can do. You can't hurt yourself by doing that. Having a biosecurity program, even if you have mycoplasma, you don't want to bring somebody else's headache onto your place if you're trying to clean up your mess. And I'm not saying everybody's place is a mess with it. It's just there. It's an aggravating disease. It's a costly disease. And I think part of the other problem why we see this disease manifest itself the way it has is that people are afraid to euthanize a bird when they know it has it. They just keep it, and it's going around spreading it through the feed, through the water, and other ways, and then they'll breed to it, doing things that they shouldn't do.
Can we talk about that a second? So that kind of leads into breeding for resistance.
Mm-hmm.
I try to breed towards resistance as much as I can. Now, I know some diseases you can't do that. It's just impossible.
Mm-hmm.
But I also practice really good biosecurity, so I'm avoiding most diseases that are out there.
Mm-hmm.
But when I see a sick chicken, that's the first thing I do is I cull them, because I look at mycoplasma, like bronchitis. I look at those as like breeder diseases.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the kind of diseases you don't want in your yard. They do affect your offspring. And like mycoplasma, it's passed from the hen to the egg. So let's talk about that. The idea of breeding for resistance when it comes to mycoplasma.
Okay. So the easiest thing to do is just like you do. If you recognize it, let me take another step back myself. You would be smart to learn how to test your own flock. You got to spend a few dollars. And that's where the other rub comes in with a lot of people. They don't want to spend the money and the time to do this, because I see this on a daily basis, and I've been doing this a long time. So I've seen a lot of it. It's not like one isolated case here, an isolated case there. But you can buy the antigen to run your own test. You just got to spend the money to do it. It's readily available. It's an easy test to do. If you've seen a pullurum test done, this is just a little bit more difficult than that, in that the pullurum test uses the whole blood as it comes out of the bird. For the mycoplasma test, you'll need the serum from the bird. So you'll take a small amount of blood from the wing, and you'll let it coagulate in a syringe. And as it coagulates, it'll have an amber-colored fluid surrounding it. You want one drop of that, one drop of the antigen, put on the same plate you did the pullurum on, handle it in the same way, mix it up, pick it up, rotate it, and do all the stuff they tell you to do, and read it after so many minutes. It looks exactly the same way. It's as easy as falling off the bench. Most people that are NPIP have seen it.
So if we run the tests and we cull the symptomatic birds, we have a good chance to create a very strong resistant family, right?
Yeah, because what I would do is I would take the birds that are not showing it, that come out of that negative, and I put them as far away from. You have to be prepared. And again, we're talking about money. We're talking about maintaining 2 separate pens. You want to keep offspring over here, and you want to blood test them. And I'm not generally a proponent of killing any bird, but we're talking about here a different story. So in order to clean up, you're going to take the ones that are positive, and right then and there, that day they turn positive on you in that test, they're going to be gone. And the birds that are negative are going to be moved to a clean facility. And then you still have to keep testing. You might have some sleepers in there, some you misread, some weren't showing at the time, all that kind of stuff. But it's a very accurate test for that kind of thing. It's come a long way over the years.
That falls right in line with what I would do. I haven't tested my birds yet. I haven't seen symptoms of it, but I usually tell people do that. Isolate your birds, when they come in, quarantine them, check them out, cull the ones that are symptomatic, and then you have a good chance. So I would tell everybody to do that. Now, one of my members contacted me, and she was like really upset because she's like, you won't believe this, but I've got mycoplasma in my yard. What do I do? Mm-hmm. And because I'm cull, especially the symptomatic birds, I said, go ahead and give Peter a call and see what he says. He may have an option I'm not aware of. And you gave her some pretty good advice, and it falls right in line with what you just said.
Right.
And she got hold of me, and she was so excited because she found out the ones that were carriers, I guess you could say, as she culled them, and now she's back on track. So she was very happy.
Now she has to watch. Don't fall asleep at the wheel, and continue to watch that flock and monitor it, and go back and do some more testing to make sure you're staying that way. And if her intent is just to have the birds for her own pleasure, that's fine. If her intent is to sell stock from those now clean birds, you can get more money, as far as I'm concerned, because you can say you've tested them. And if somebody wants it written on paper, then just send a couple of samples off to the lab and get that lab work back. But I've always talked to people about testing the birds, but the issue has always been money. I've always talked to them about vaccinating. And there's a number of things there. We can get to that later. We want to talk about that part of it. But the biosecurity part of it, I mean, you can't really say enough about it, especially once you have a negative flock.
Biosecurity is my favorite subject because I don't think anybody does it. And I think it's so important. It would avoid a lot of problems in the future. And I see it so many times where somebody will go get a bird, order a bird in the mail, whatever, or go get someone's bird, bring it right on the yard, mix it in right away. And their attitude is, my birds have been exposed to everything, or the mycoplasma is ubiquitous and it's everywhere. So why should I even concern myself with it? So should we be concerned? People that have that kind of attitude.
Sure, you should. I guess they like the idea of having sick birds. They like the idea of spending money on medication. And it's harder and harder to get medication these days. I know a lot of people are buying pigeon products. They're not the same. They're not the same concentration generally. And they don't come with any kind of directions. You always have to go somewhere else to get your directions, and they're not always correct. I mean, I deal with that on a daily basis. You're much better off to have birds that you don't have to tend to. Before the show started, I was talking to a gal from Tennessee, a real nice gal. She's got a crop issue with one of her young birds, and it keeps recurring. She's done different things and the correct things to try to alleviate it, and it's just not getting any better. And I said to her, you need things that you can put in the water to help this bird with its crop. And I know it's a little off subject, but my point is, it's no fun medicating the bird constantly, separating it out from the rest of the flock, putting it in a quarantine space, taking care of it 2, 3, 4 times a day on a special basis. It gets old after a while. What's the point of having chickens? I mean, it's supposed to be a pleasure thing. Again, I deal with it on a daily basis. People who just don't want to put in that kind of effort. And it doesn't matter where they come from. And what I mean by that, backyard game chicken, it doesn't really matter. Pet chicken, there are those that are willing to go the mile to take care of them. And there's those that use different approaches to it, like we've been talking about.
You know, Fred says something here that caught my eye. And what's the best approach if a rooster or hen has a slight bubbly eye? And that's the symptoms we see most of the time. Most backyard breeders, that's their first things they see when it comes to mycoplasma. Close the nostrils, close the mouth real good, and watch the bubbles come out. So
indicates an upper respiratory. If you know your flock, you know what you're dealing with. One of the ways to tell is real simple, is to give that bird a couple of doses of penicillin. And the reason you're going to do that is that penicillin, so we'll go back and look at mycoplasma, like I said in the beginning, it has no cell wall. Well, the mode of action of penicillin is to destroy the cell wall. So if you were to use that penicillin on that bird and the bubbles went away and the bird recovered, it's not mycoplasma, it's something else.
Yeah.
That would be my approach to it. I know it's not scientific, but it's the only tool you got in the box other than getting the antigen. And the antigen is readily available from Charles River Laboratories in Charles River, Massachusetts. You can look them up online. That's what I would do. I'd get the bottle of penicillin, give it a good shot of it, and see how it works. And I would do it over a couple of days. If it gets better, you're dealing with something else.
I just want to say this real quick, because I was thinking about it, is that this is why I bring experts like Peter, and they are experts in their field, because I have a whole different approach. Peter and I talk about it all the time. He's looking to save the bird, make it possible to save every bird they can. And that's through nutrition, medication, vaccination. And I'm looking to increase the resistance to disease and make the strain stronger through culling and selection. So I just want to say that I'm so glad that Peter come on this show and cover the kind of things that I don't even research this. When it comes to health, if I have a sick bird, I just cull it. So I don't even research this stuff. And so I'm not going to pretend that I know everything about it. I know a lot about it. I know just through raising these birds for so long, you learn things. And talking to Peter, talking to Dr. Gallardo, you can't help but absorb this kind of thing. But yeah, I just wanted to say that I'm so glad you guys are coming on here to explain it to my listeners and my followers, because you guys could do a much better job than I can, because I don't even research this stuff. Okay. My approach is simple. Cull.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. This show is brought to you by the Breeders' Academy, where we will help you to increase your knowledge of breeding, advance your skills as a breeder, and help you to improve the quality and performance of your fowl.
As a member, I'll provide you a roadmap that you will need to create a true family or strain. Starting with a cock from one breeder and a hen from another breeder, no problem. We can help you to turn your flock of hybrid crosses or mongrels into a pure family or strain, and show you how to continually improve that strain each generation. We'll start by showing you how to select your seed fowl and how to turn that seed fowl into a high-quality foundation strain. Our proven breeding programs and specialty courses are designed to take you step by step through the breeding process. And best of all, I'll be there to help you every step of the way.
We urge you to check it out. You have nothing to lose, and you can cancel at any time. You also have a 30-day money-back guarantee. Simply go to www.breedersacademy.com to sign up. Becoming a member is a simple process. You start by selecting your membership level, enter your username, password, and email address. Read and agree to the terms and conditions, then click the PayPal button. Once you have entered your payment information, you will have instant access to the website.
The Breeders' Academy will not only change the way you think about breeding, but improve the way you breed your fowl.
There are better methods for testing birds, but they're much, much more expensive. The test box that people use, a lot of people make them themselves. It's like a shoe box with a light bulb with a piece of plexiglass and 1 or 2 inch squares squared off on the top. Each square represents a blood sample, and you can band them however you want. You can use a grease pencil to mark on each one which one is which, so you know what you're doing, and it turns positive on you. You just do what you got to do with it. Or there are other approaches other than euthanizing the birds, which are not going to get rid of the disease itself. You can't say that you're mycoplasma free. You can control it. I've got loads of people that control it. And every time somebody steps away from that program, it comes roaring right back, because it's still there. But those people choose to do that, and there are methodologies to do that. And again, it boils down to money and time. If you're stretched for time and every day you come home and it's just a chore to feed and water your birds, and you don't have time to do a whole lot else, you're not really going to have time to do a good mycoplasma control program, let alone anything else. And I get that. There are days I'm stretched 9 ways from Sunday and I don't want to be, especially now in semi-retirement. If I have to work 5 days, I get irritated.
I say if you're a breeder and you want to create a nice strain that's going to last for years, to me, you got to make the time. Now, if you're just having birds in your yard and you're bringing new birds all the time, I can see that kind of approach. But I think breeders should go the extra mile.
And not everybody I deal with is a breeder.
Yeah, no, I know. Yeah.
Okay. There are breeders and quasi-breeders and everything else in between, feather merchants, the whole bit. My goal is to save every bird that I can, but I also don't want to be out here as a guy that says you do this and you don't have to worry about it. If you get on a mycoplasma control program, you will have a good, solid program. It takes time. That's the other thing. And when I say time in that respect, I'm talking about just because you gave the shot of the vaccine or the medication today, don't expect miracles tomorrow. It takes a period of time of being diligent about it and culling some birds. The really sick ones need to go under those circumstances. I look at it this way. Do everything you can to protect your bird as you would yourself, whatever you feel comfortable with doing. Whether you get vaccinated, whether you hide in a corner, whether you hide your head in the sand when it comes to your birds as far as their overall health is concerned, it's up to you. They're yours.
We touched on this earlier. Does it help to disinfect the eggs before incubating them?
I think it's a good idea.
Now, if you've tested your birds and they don't have it, then you don't need to do that. But that's assuming that the flock already has it, right?
I would do it anyway, especially if you got a lot of dirty eggs. People get a lot of dirty eggs and set them, and then you get the exploding eggs in the incubator. So I would do it. You can get these sanitizing wipes now. You don't have to give the things a bath. Just wipe them down. They're made for chickens, supposedly. So I've never used them, but that's what I would suggest. When you're incubating eggs, you don't want to be dragging a bunch of bacteria into the incubator that doesn't need to be there when they hatch out.
So what's a good disinfectant to use?
Tectrol is one. And from what I understand, the Tectrol used to come in a spray, and I no longer have any, and I'm sold out of it. But I still believe it comes in a gallon container. I haven't looked into it lately, but people are using that. You could use Oxine. Oxine's pretty easy to do, and just a gentle spray over the top of them. People use that to clean their incubators as well. Pretty good product overall.
A lot of people don't realize that there's different forms of mycoplasma. We've got MG, and then we got MS. We see the MG more often, right?
Oh, yeah, by far. Yeah, by far. And the MS is more of an opportunistic disease. It's a mycoplasma, just like the MG. So it's got no cell wall, easily disinfected against with a common disinfectant. Being out in the heat destroys. Here's the other thing. Because it has no cell wall, it makes it vulnerable to disinfection, to weather changes, hot, cold. But the other thing is it's what we call host dependent. It depends on the host to live. Can't live that long outside the bird's body. Now, I've read different research that shows that anywhere from 24 hours on up, just depends, and different textured materials, rubber, wood, asphalt, that kind of thing. Doesn't seem to live very long on it either. Newer stuff says longer. Who knows how people are conducting those tests and under what circumstances. So it gets its nourishment and its nutrition from the host. So it's very poultry adapted or avian adapted. So it can't stay outside the body regardless of what the temperature is, even if it's an ideal temperature, forever, because it needs the nutrients that it gets from the host animal, which is the chicken. Either one, the MG or MS, both of them. But the MS settles down in the joints. That's why they call it Mycoplasma synoviae. So it's more of a joint problem. It can become a respiratory issue. It can do that too. So if you have MG, MS, that's like a double whammy. You throw a little bit of E. coli in on top of that, and then you've got a real case of CRD. You talked about that earlier. So said we'd get to it. Chronic respiratory disease really is mycoplasma complicated with E. coli.
So do we see MS mostly in the younger birds? We don't see it that much in the older birds, right?
You don't see either one of these in young birds for that matter. Again, it goes back to both of them generally being brought out by stress. Yeah. Something happens out of feed, out of water, too hot, too cold, moving, vaccinating, the stress of being chased around the yard by overzealous pen mates, fighting on the yard. Most people don't understand how to be a game chicken to fight on the yard. The regular chickens, they go out at tooth and nail. So when you see bullying in the breeding pen, that's when you can see it too. Okay. You get an overzealous rooster and he's in there beating up everybody. So there's a lot of different things that happen along those lines.
Lloyd's asking, if a breeder vaccinates his chicks, does he need to continue vaccinating them their whole life?
Yes. It will not eliminate the disease. It won't necessarily keep them from becoming infected either. Don't forget, it's a bacterin, so it's a little bit different. Its mode of action is a little bit different, but it's a good tool. It's a good tool to have.
Does it make them a carrier? Does it turn them into a carrier?
No, it does not. It's an inactivated vaccine, meaning there's nothing live in the bottle.
Okay.
That's one of the things about it. If you get on the program and you don't like it or it's not for you, you're only out the money and time you've spent for it. On average, I guess if you do the math right, you do 500 birds twice for about $90 or so, depending on where you buy it. And I think that boils down to about 18 cents a bird, the double shot.
Julie's saying I had something that looked like coccidiosis, but was told if it was, they would be dead. So I'm not sure if she's relating this to mycoplasma or not.
One has nothing to do with the other than coccidiosis left unchecked can be deadly. Mycoplasma, not so much. It takes a good while for it to really kill a bird. You'd really have to be ignorant to let a case of MG kill one of your birds before you recognize it and treated it. You'd really have to be living under a rock these days, I would think, with all the information that's been put out there.
I think most people are more in fear of like coryza than they are mycoplasma. Mm-hmm. Can we compare the two as far as how much problems they can create?
Coryza are a little bit different, spreads more rapidly, lives very well outside the bird's body in relation to the mycoplasma, and a different set of symptoms. Can range anywhere from swollen faces, which can mimic fowl cholera, if you look at the two. It is a bacteria. It does have a cell wall. It's not host dependent, so therefore it lives very well outside the bird's body in relation to the other. I'll be honest with you, if I had my druthers, I'd take a mycoplasma any day in my own situation. if that's what I was going to be stuck with, I would take it because it can control it a lot easier.
But I can fix coryza quicker or easier than I can mycoplasma.
I don't know
Well,
about
to
that.
populate the parent stock, bring up new from the offspring.
Again, I
I
think
can't do that with mycoplasma, right?
again, I think it would be a situation where I would look at how many birds in my flock had it, and I would evaluate where I was going to go from there. What plan of action? Think it through. Do I put everybody down, start over? Whether we get free stock that doesn't have coryza or mycoplasma have to be brought into play. And I don't know too many people that are going to jump up with a red flag and wave it back and forth and tell you that they've got either one of them.
Yeah, right.
Oh no, no, never had it. I could have retired if I had a dime for every time somebody told me that they bought from somebody that didn't have any problems. All of a sudden, you've never had a chicken before, and there's never been any chickens on your place, but they're dying left and right. So it's a can of worms in a way, because I can control the mycoplasma in my book a lot easier. There are better medications to do it, especially now since everything has gone script.
Mhm.
Before, we used to have gallimycin. We used to take gallimycin and oxytetracycline, which is terramycin, but in a concentrated form, put that together with Tylenol and really knock it down. But you can't do that today. We used to take the oxytet, the chlortetracycline, the Tylenol, and gallimycin, mix it together for CRD. Worked really well.
Beeman 13 says, besides the bubble in the eye, and that's what most people contribute to mycoplasma, what are the other more common symptoms we would see?
There's some rattling to it. There's some facial swelling, eye involvement. You may or may not have a runny nose, almost similar to coryza. The symptoms are not too far apart. But you would see one bird here and a bird over there for the most part, whereas coryza, you would see a couple birds over here, the next day, couple more, every day, more and more of them. And both of them can be spread at the feed or in the water. And you'll see more of the snotty nose with the coryza, which makes it easier to spread. And it's going to hang around that water and that feeder a lot longer than the mycoplasma. So it makes the mycoplasma, in my book, a little bit harder to spread.
Yeah.
Not saying it doesn't spread, it does. But it's just a little bit different animal. And I know there's probably people that look at me and say, that guy's nuts, but I think you can control it a lot better. You got to be diligent about it. Again, you can't just say, well, I vaccinated and walk away from it and everything's hunky-dory. It doesn't work that way.
Lloyd here is one of our members, and he asked me this inside the Breeders' Academy, the same question. And I told him that you were going to be on the show and you'd be a good one to answer this, to come on the show and ask it. I think he's in Burma. If a breeder vaccinated his chicks from Merrick's, does he need to continue vaccinating the chicks their whole life too?
That's an easy one to answer, and the answer is no. But there's a caveat to that. Remember in the beginning, I took a few minutes to talk about the immune system. We know from research, tons of it, done by experts in the field, that late-breaking Merrick's, this is birds that were properly vaccinated. They were commercial birds, but they were having problems with them breaking down later in the laying cycle with Merrick's, which should not happen. And when they investigated, what they found was it wasn't the fault of the vaccine itself. It was the fault of the failing immune system of the bird, because it's the immune system that holds the vaccine up, because vaccine does not prevent a bird from becoming infected. It prevents the bird from showing the symptoms. Therefore, a bird who is vaccinated and exposed is going to shed the vaccine strain, which is non-harmful in any way, shape, or form. It's non-oncogenic, but it's also going to shed whatever field strain it was exposed to, unbeknownst to anybody. So you take that bird and you put it in with non-vaccinates, and you're going to have a problem, because they're going to pick up that field strain that bird is shedding. And you'll never know it. You'll never know if those birds are shedding, because you don't know if you were exposed. That's one of the reasons why people say they don't want to vaccinate for Merrick's, which is a bunch of crap. A bird is better off vaccinated than not. If you were to take that immune system and nurture it, the same thing for yourself. Makes me laugh when people are out here, wow, I'm not going to get the vaccine for this. I'm going to rely on my immune system. Yeah. Majority of the country is obese.
Rebecca's the one we were talking about earlier who called you. And I'm assuming that's what she's talking about here. She used a white dry erase board to document the results, and she could easily see which birds were infected and which not. Nancy's asking, if you're giving your flock the best nutrition possible, could that deter your flock from getting these kinds of diseases? It helps, right?
The better nutrition they have, the better off their gut's going to be. Firmly believe in that. I'm not a big believer in feeding junk food to birds, treats and scratch. Nope. You buy a bag of complete feed for a reason.
Yeah. Well, a lot of the gamecock feeds are most notorious for incomplete feeds because they just don't have everything they need. They look for the pretty. When we're looking at the gamecock feeds out there, which are far from complete feeds, they're just a bunch of grains put together with calf manna as their protein, a lot of oats. They overdo the fiber. So what does that do to the gut when they're feeding them like that?
You have to realize that the gut is made up of a bacterial biome. There's a zillion bacteria that are there, and you're trying to promote what we call gut-friendly bacteria, those that are going to keep the condition of the gut healthy. And some of them rely on some of those content of the feed to exist. And when you start feeding junk, it's the same thing as humans going off on an ice cream eating binge and then wonder why they've got classic diarrhea for 2 days. All the fat content and the sugar just not healthy. And the same thing goes for the chickens. And about 70% of our immune cells reside in the gut. And you must take care of it. It's all part of the picture. And if you're not doing that part of it, you're letting your birds down. Pretty simple.
So we are talking about mycoplasma for the most part today. Any natural remedies or cures? The one I get a lot.
None that I've found all by themselves, but I'm a big fan of the oil of oregano for keeping your gut on your birds healthy, and very easy to do. Put it in the water. It's been a godsend for a lot of things that we've been able to accomplish. Turmeric could go a long way to help as well. We know that helps keep inflammation down. It does the same thing in chickens that it does in humans. So any of those two are good.
So mycoplasma, the way it's transmitted, I think we touched on it quite a bit, actually, but I just want to highlight it. It's both a vertical and a horizontal disease, right?
It is.
So, which makes it even tougher to control and avoid. So that testing would come in handy.
Yeah, and it's something that people can do. I don't know what the antigen runs now, and I don't know how many tests are in the bottle anymore. Probably not more than 100. It's a little tiny bottle, but you only need a drop just like you do the pylorium. And if anybody has any trouble getting it that wants to get it, I can probably help them do that.
So the fact that this disease is slow spreading, it gives us time. It's actually to our benefit. I mean, we're able to test them. We're able to get rid of the birds that are showing symptoms and get ahead of the game. So it's not something that's, unless you bring your bird and you start just taking that cock and breeding to every hen you got on your yard, then you got a problem.
Another thing I would do, if you want to test and funds are not there to do a big program, most people don't have a lot of breeders. I'd start there. Take all of your males and females that are breeders and test them. That'll tell you what's in the rest of the flock. If it's not in the breeders, more than likely not in the rest of the flock.
That's right.
So you can save some time and energy and money there. The other thing is, and you'd have to get the materials from them, but the Georgia Poultry Lab down in Athens, Georgia, you can go online to their website and they do a zillion different poultry tests. You can talk to somebody there and how to get the materials to do it. It was pretty simple. If you take a small blood sample from the bird and send it in to them, they can run some of the cheaper tests, such as they can run that plate test for you, or they can run an HI test, which is a little bit more involved, but they can run those tests for you. There are other ways to do it, but PCR testing is like $65, $70 per bird.
Ooh.
And there are cheaper outfits around. Zoologics out in California, in your neck of the woods there. I don't know which part of the state they're in, but you can look them up on the internet. They have an avian panel that they'll do. You can get a hold of them. A little bit more money. Can't remember what they charge, but I've had people do it and be successful at doing it. It's all what you do with it after you get it. Be prepared to spend some money if your birds are positive, to make some decisions to medicate, vaccinate, clean up.
We talked about the fact that it's brought about stress a lot of times. Do they need to be symptomatic to pass it to another bird?
Yeah, because they have to be showing some sort of symptoms basically to do that. Yeah.
So that's another good reason to cull the ones that are symptomatic, right? Because when we're talking about stress, we're talking about poor husbandry practices, nutrition, weather conditions, and we're basically talking about the really dry conditions, the really wet, the cold, the hot. So what other vectors are we looking at? Are we looking at the droppings and the feather follicle?
Not so much the feather follicle as mucus from the mouth, anything from the mouth, food that is touched, water that I've consumed and left a disease behind for another bird to pick up. It does spread bird to bird, but predominantly through the egg. That's where most of it comes from. People don't realize what they've got, and even after they realize what they got, they continue to breed from what they've got without doing anything.
That's right.
And you're aware of that. I mean, even on the gamefowl side, it's the same way.
Oh, no, it's really bad.
And on their side, they don't want to give the second shot. And in my opinion, if you're not going to give the second shot, don't waste your time. Because if it was meant to be a one-shot deal, it would have been a one-shot deal.
So we're looking at 2 shots for
two
Okay.
2 shots about 4 to 6 weeks apart. And
Okay.
that's the other thing. If you can't adhere to that scheduling, don't do it either.
And that's the
Because,
problem too, Peter, is because these guys, a lot of them have a lot of birds.
well, then you're going to have to live with a medication program that's going to be expensive down the road. All these things that people want to use are expensive, especially today. Trill and
Baytril is it's
Baytril,
illegal now. Yeah.
Well, I know that, but that don't mean nothing. Baytril, LS50, Thailand, water soluble, all of those things expensive.
What about dust? Can it be passed through dust in the litter?
I would say so. Probably less likely though. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Is this species related? Can they get it from rats or wild birds at all?
Probably from a wild bird. I've never seen that routine. I've heard that crap before, but I don't know anybody that can really point back and point the finger at the bird. I see this more as a problem of people not taking care of the initial problem and just selling birds all over the place. Even if they're not selling them into an individual directly, they take them to the sale barn when they're sick. And everybody knows Dr. Batista here at the local lab that I deal with, he's moved on now to work for a vaccine company, but he used to go to the sale barn up here all the time. And I would say about 95% of the birds that were in that sale barn were mycoplasma positive.
Wow.
And they were running PCR tests, pick up the genetic fingerprint. There's no hiding it. If it's there, it's there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And even if they run a PCR test, they can tell you more or less by looking at the numbers that it throws out if it's really an active case or it's one that's just sitting there waiting to become active. They might not use that terminology, but that's the kind of terminology I have to use with the people I talk to.
One question I did get the other day when I told him I was going to do mycoplasma, he asked me, is it a gateway to other diseases? And I'm assuming that it weakens their immune system, which would make it even more susceptible to others.
The chicken's immune system, while it's highly functional, it's more difficult to handle multiple problems at the same time. So when it's under attack actively with mycoplasma, it's not going to enjoy E. coli. It's not going to enjoy infectious bronchitis. They're just devastating, and they have a tendency to be all respiratory diseases. So it's going to make it much more difficult.
Joel's saying cells and auctions are a huge spreader of disease. We're just talking about that, and he avoids them like the plague, I guess.
Smart guy.
Yeah. Not just mycoplasma, but every disease. There's a reason why these people are getting rid of birds, and that's the easiest and fastest way to do it. Even though they're only making like $5, it contributes to their feed bill. Yep. And they're not going to take their best birds to those places.
That's right. You would take even a person who is going to be showing their birds. If they're a true breeder, they may hatch out 5, 6, 7, 800 birds or more. I had a good friend of mine who was a champion breeder, who's retired now, but he was a champion breeder of show birds. I won't say the type. I don't want anybody to put two and two together. And he used to hatch out quite a few birds and keep maybe 50, 60 birds out of the whole group, if that many, that were going to be the birds that he was going to grow out and see how they shaped up and keep paring it down. The others went to the sale barn. He sold some at shows. I'm not saying they were diseased in any way, shape, or form. I'm just saying that's what happens to them. And if you can't get rid of them, you take them to the sale barn.
And you see that too in most what I would call true breeders that really take it seriously and have good families. It's not that they don't have a lot of birds per se, is that they keep their numbers down because they're always getting rid of the substandard, the sick, the defective birds, which makes it look like they don't have as many birds as other people. They're just good at culling, which allows them to select better birds for breeding. Because of that, they also have the healthiest birds too. When it comes to the feed, if you have 3 legs on a chair, one of those legs are so important because if you don't have the nutrition right, then it doesn't matter how good the genes are, how good the gene pool is, and how good the family, you're never going to see the full potential of that family. And you're not going to be able to select them properly and improve the family.
Well, right off the bat, when they're mixing that feed that way, they're not getting anywhere near the proper amount of amino acids that they need. So they're not going to get the growth. You just won't.
That's right. Yeah, they're missing so much. And I don't think it's enough to even make up for a gamecock feed that you're not adding the pellet to, too.
If you don't have enough amino acids in there, they're not going to hatch right. They're not going to do anything right. And people complain about it all the time. Hatchability. Anybody practically can hatch a chicken egg. If you've got a viable egg, it'll hatch. The question is, how viable will that chick be afterward? That's the key. And you want good, strong, healthy chicks that get out of the shell on their own and are vibrant and running around in a brooder, and you don't want the weak ones. And you'll get that with a lot of those mixes as other guys are feeding. It makes a big difference.
Nutrena makes all flock. I know Tractor Supply carries it. I have 5 or 6 feed stores in my town. I think most of them do carry all flock. It's gotten to be a pretty popular feed It's one of the freshest. I've talked to their reps and they said it's not exactly organic, but it's the closest organic you're going to get. There's not a lot of preservatives in it. So it's not going to have the best shelf life. So you don't want to order a whole bunch of it. So you order what you need, what you can use within a month, and just make sure when you buy it, look at the tag, make sure it's fresh. That's all. So let's get back to Mycoplasma. So what's the incubation period, Peter? What are we looking at?
I think it's right around 7 to 10 days. It's relatively short.
Again, we're looking at a slow-moving disease, so it's when they're exposed. Buckeye Craig, he always has some of the best questions. In buying used equipment or pens, would spraying it with bleach solution eliminate the disease? That in the sun, right? Exposure to the sun?
Yeah, except for the organic material. Any manure or bedding that's left on anything, you certainly want to get that off of it before you even begin to disinfect it. Because most disinfectants don't work well in organic material unless you saturate it. Sometimes you can't saturate it, so it's so thick. Just depends.
Yeah.
And I don't know about bleach.
What was the solution you said to use besides bleach?
Oxine or Tectrol. I sell the
okay.
Oxine. It comes with directions. It's pretty simple. What I like about Oxine over some of the others is Oxine can be given in the drinking water. You can let them drink it. What I like about a product that I can use in more than one way, so you can use it as an aerosol. You can buy one of these foggers, and you can fog the coop with the chickens in it. So if you had a respiratory disease, you could help keep it in check till you got help. One of the ways you would do it is you mix the Oxine up in it. You'd put a table in there. It's like a card table, about 30 inches off the floor. Close the coop up. Make your electrical connection break over by the door. Turn the thing on. Fog it till you can just about see the birds. Turn it off. Leave it for 15 minutes or so. And then open up the coop. And you can do that a couple times a day. That'll go a long way to keeping things under control as best you can rather than doing nothing. So that's a good program to be on. I'll throw out here, besides the disinfectant, is that you do not want to give any of the vaccine during the laying cycle. So if you're going to vaccinate, you want to make sure you're doing it after they're coming out of molt and before they start laying again. The reason for that is these are killed vaccines. So the way they work is by aggravating tissue at the injection site. And by aggravating that tissue, it'll cause swelling at the injection site as a general rule. And there can be some depression in the birds and they may stop laying eggs. And they'll come back into it. It's just at that point in time, they're not feeling so hot from it. And it just depends. Again, this is about as variable as it is in human beings. Each bird's genetics are different. And each bird within a flock may, or even in different breeds, will react to it differently. I've seen birds take both shots, never have a swelling whatsoever, never have a moment of depression. And I've seen others that looked like they were going to die any second. And it's not a live vaccine. And this is one of the things people can't understand about the current vaccines that have been given to humans. Everything has a side effect of some sort. These in chickens, for the most part, just don't happen to have any life-threatening things to them as a possibility. Although you could, but it's very rare. But the swelling, it's a hit and miss thing. Some have it, some don't, and some of them never go away. And to a degree, it's not supposed to go away because what happens is the immune system will send out immune cells, eosinophils, and they'll go out and they'll wall that off. And then they'll keep building more immune cells because it's a foreign object that's going to sit there and it's designed to leach out over time. So it's going to be there for a period of time. That's where you get your protection from that particular vaccine. And you're going to do that twice. So it's going to make a difference. I just want to throw it out there before we get off on something else and I forget about saying it because it is important. And the other part of it is if you decide to vaccinate, follow the directions on the bottle. And if you need help with those directions, call me and I'll go over it with you. But the vaccine requires you to take it out of the refrigerator beforehand and let it come to room temperature. So if I were going to vaccinate tomorrow after dinner tonight, maybe before I went to bed, I would take it out of the refrigerator, shake it up, put it on a counter. When you get up in the morning, before you go and do anything, shake it back up. It'll pretty much be at room temperature and be ready to use. You can do that because it is a killed vaccine. There's nothing in the bottle to harm, nothing. They will always tell you keep it at this temperature because those vaccines go into the food chain. They'll also have a disclaimer on it. It'll tell you use it and throw the balance away. Nobody does that. Nobody. Okay. You just have to use an aseptic technique to get into the bottle, which is clean the top of the bottle with alcohol. Don't touch it. Use a clean needle as a draw needle in the bottle to get out the vaccine. And when you're all done, draw a needle out, throw it away, clean the top of the bottle, put it back in the refrigerator, and good to go the next time. So you can use it over and over. That's the good thing about it. The thing I've found that lots of times is getting people to take that direction. If you're directing them to do something, and I'm being honest in what I'm saying, and I'm not trying to be disparaging to anybody, but lots of times when it involves a reasonable amount of money, they're not going to do it. I'm a firm believer in do what you feel you got to do. You know that. We've talked about it.
Yeah, but I'm a teacher. I'm an educator. Yeah. I'm going to try to convince you of what I know, and what I believe, and what I teach. If you don't want to learn from me, then you actually do need to go somewhere else, because I'm going to give you my opinion. I'm going to give you my experience. I'm going to give you what I know, and that's what I'm going to instill on you. And yes, I do think this is what you should do. Now, if you want to listen to everybody in the world, then you may need to go somewhere else, because you're not learning anything. And that's just the way I am. My Breeders Academy members are on my website for a reason, because they trust me. They believe in what I'm telling them. They see results and they stay. And that's it.
I don't always get to see the outcome of conversations. And my conversations with people can be long, they can be short, just depends.
Well, I can tell you this. I've been sending my members to you, and they ask me questions on healthcare and diseases. If it's an easy one, I may answer it, but a lot of times I've been sending them over to you. I'm sure you've seen an influx of calls. I like that I have people that I can send to. Not only do I have a website, and we're teaching them some, we're improving them, we're advancing them and their birds, but I have an expert team that I can send people to make sure they're getting the answers that they need. I think that's awesome.
Well, it's something that's sorely needed. And again, I think like you do, not enough people are taking advantage of the tools that are being given to them. Not costing them anything to listen to this program other than their time.
Yeah, this is free.
And I'm not getting paid. So I'm doing this courtesy.
I can promote your website. You just tell me when.
You make me have to work 5 days a week. I'm going to come out there and beat you to death.
You said you're not seeing the results of your advice, and I can tell you I'm seeing your results because they're telling me how well it's working out. So just know that. But I do see the results in what I teach, because my members are always showing me and telling me that it works. I think it would be hard for me if I wasn't seeing the results or wasn't hearing how things are working out for people. That would be discouraging, actually, because I kind of need that feedback that we're on the right track.
I think that if you do it as long as I've done it, you start not to care about it from the standpoint. I'm a firm believer.
You lose interest.
Well, I'm a firm believer. I may lose interest in that particular party. I don't lose interest in the birds. See, I'm more about the birds than I am about money. I always have been. Because if I wanted money, I would have been retired years ago doing something different. I keep my fingers in it now because I enjoy it. I never did enjoy packing packages, still don't enjoy packing packages. And
I'm the same way.
Yeah, but it is what it is. And that's the path I chose, and sit down and shut up. You know?
I think that's the reason I don't try to sell so many books, because I have to package them and mail them out. It's a hassle. Let's get back to mycoplasma. Sure. So does the disease affect, forget nutrition, forget some other things, does the disease affect the hatchability and fertility of the brood fowl?
Yeah, it can. Sure.
In what way?
Well, they're just not going to breed. They're not going to breed, or if they breed, they're not going to breed as often, but it can affect them. Sure.
So it changes their activity, basically, right?
It's an upper respiratory thing. So remember we were talking about showing pictures. If you were to see the lungs and the heart of birds that were infected with this stuff, you would see lungs should be spongy looking and pinkish, very pinkish in color. When they get infected with mycoplasma, lungs are just junk. There's no air coming in out of that. And these are cases that have gone on for periods of time, but one of these days we'll get around to doing something like that, more instructional, because I think people would then understand. When I do a seminar and I talk about coccidiosis, I always lead with the bloodiest slide I have to get their attention and make them understand this is what the gut looks like when it gets out of control. And when it gets to this point, turning it around is pretty tough. And if you do turn it around, this bird more than likely will be a slow grower, because the destruction to the intestinal, the villi, and even its immune system. You know, it could be one of those birds that's chronically sick. One you're talking about culling all the time might have been a good bird at one time. And coccidiosis, you know all about it yourself. I mean, it's a tough disease.
Any disease that interferes with their growth and development should be, I think that's why I look at mycoplasma the way I do. That's why I look at coccidiosis, because it's all about getting those birds off on the right foot. Because once they're behind, they don't catch up.
They become the runts. Even as adults, they're still behind the others and never catch up. Nutrition, both human and otherwise, chicken is very important.
So is that why I'm a couple inches shorter than my brother? He had a healthier appetite than I did.
Could be, but you're Italian, so it could be genetics. A lot of shorties in the Italian trade.
Well, I'm taller than most Italians. I'm 5'10".
Yeah, that's a little tall. Yeah. Most of them I know around here, they're probably about 5'6", 5'5".
Yeah. Yeah, 5'6", 5'7". My brother's he's 6 foot.
The women probably shorter yet.
No, my sister, she's tall for a girl too. She's taller than my wife. Yeah, I just wondering. So if we look at diseases, we look at a lot of the respiratory diseases and they look at it and they go, oh, that's mycoplasma. Or it could be something else. What other diseases resemble mycoplasma that they could get mixed up with?
Depending upon the severity of it, I would say infectious bronchitis, but you would have to understand that's going to spread like wildfire. Again, being a coronavirus, similar to what we have in humans. And it does the same thing in chickens that it does in humans. It attacks all the major organs, including the reproductive organs. So you're going to look at it attacking the oviduct. And that's where you get your slab-sided eggs and your crinkled eggs and your eggs with a little bit too much calcium. And not every egg that comes out of a chicken that has too much calcium on it means they had infectious bronchitis. Sometimes it's just the nature of the bird, how long the egg was sitting in the shell gland. But pretty much not a whole lot else. Coryza maybe, because while it's faster spreading, a lot of the snotty nose, that kind of thing, eye involvement, conjunctivitis in the eye could do it, but not a whole lot else. LT, you'll know they sit on their haunches, put their head out in front of them, make a cawing sound, may or may not sling blood, depending on whether they were picked up a vaccine strain or they picked up a field strain. Most days now, from what I'm seeing, they're vaccine strains, people using the wrong vaccine when it comes to LT. We can do that another day. But that's a hot one. That spreads like wildfire. A couple of birds today, a whole bunch tomorrow, and everybody else in 2 or 3 days.
One of the worst diseases out there.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Mortality from that can be staggering. Bronchitis too. Bronchitis can linger on and on and on and just be a real pain. And then it can do what we call recycle itself. It can come back and cycle back through again.
Do we want to talk about the treatments for this?
So if I were out here and I had some diagnosed mycoplasma or from process of elimination, I knew that it was. And again, you take a bird that's showing symptoms that you believe to be mycoplasma, give it a couple of shots of penicillin every day, maybe half a cc, depending on the size of the bird, over a course of 2 or 3 days. If it goes away, it's probably not mycoplasma, probably something else. Yeah. Okay. Could be E. coli, could be coryza, because coryza will respond to it. We just don't pick that as a choice for treatment, meaning the penicillin for coryza and other diseases, because it's an injectable. If you've got a flock, who wants to go around, and the bird going to take it either. Most injectables you want to give to 5 to 7 days. And some of them you want to give twice a day. And the bird becomes a pincushion, or you look for water soluble. So that's why we've always gone to when they were readily available, the LS50, the Thailand water soluble were easy to do, the Oxytet concentrate, the aureomycin concentrate, those products, the gallimycin when it was available. I haven't seen gallimycin water soluble in several years now. I'm assuming it's gone from the market. It didn't have a big part of the market anyway. It wasn't a normal go-to. Most of the companies that I know used it on a breeding stock when they had problems. The other one, I guess if I knew up front I was dealing with mycoplasma and I wanted to get it under control and I wasn't interested in cleaning up or I wasn't interested in vaccinating, I would probably go to Denagard. But the issue with that...
I've never heard of that one.
Yeah, Denagard. Yeah, Thiamulin. It's been around for years. In this country, you don't use it for chickens. Labeled for pigs, same thing. They use it in Europe extensively for chickens. Good thing about it, no egg withdrawal. If you use it according to the directions, even if you don't, there's never been any problem with it. It's a non-human drug. That's why it's still OTC, over the counter. The drawback to it is it tastes like crap, really bitter, and chickens don't like it. So in the treatment phase, you're looking 7.5 to 8 cc's per gallon of water for maybe 10 days. For preventative, rather for treatment, you're talking about 15, 16 cc's for 15 days. And getting them to drink it is the key. So when you get to that higher concentration, they really don't like it. So some grape juice can help, Gatorade, Kool-Aid, anything sugary will take the bitterness out of it to some degree, and they'll go ahead and drink it as a general. Have to do the same thing with hogs. Hogs won't touch it. You've got a doctor. We used to use a root beer flavoring from the food store, and they used to help the hogs get over not liking the Denagard.
That's why I've always had a problem with water-soluble vitamins and medicines, because some birds are going to drink more than others. Some are going to get too much. Some are not going to get enough. So what do you do about that?
As a general rule, they will drink their fill. As a general, I've never seen it that way other than Denagard, which can be a problem. And that's why I'm saying it up front. If you go to Denagard, and the nice thing about Denagard, you can pony it up with the Oxytet. You can pony it up with the aureomycin. I don't carry the aureomycin. I have better access to the Oxytet. concentrate. When I say concentrate, if you remember the old terramycin, 6.4 ounce bag, 181.4 grams, was very, very weak. It's only 10 grams of oxytetracycline active ingredient in the bag. So you had a whole bag of nothing. That's why it was cheap. And a lot of people would buy it for that reason, because it was cheap. Back in the day, that was a $6 bag. Today, I have the Oxytet concentrate, which is equal on an active ingredient basis to the terramycin. It's equal to 10 bags of terramycin. So you're looking at a 280 gram bag total weight, but 102.4 grams of that being actual oxytetracycline. So very powerful. And right now, that's around about $45 a bag. Still cheap if you want to look at it and go back, that being equal to the terramycin. So you would have to buy 10 bags of terramycin to get to that same level of 102.4 grams at $6 a bag. Back in the day, you'd have spent $60. So 45 is cheap in relationship when you look at it that way. Back in the day, before the prescription thing, Oxytet concentrate was only about $15 a bag. So
What about Vet RX? Does that help at all? A lot of people use it.
Yeah, not, in my opinion, not in any way to eliminate the disease, but a terrific airway expander, similar in capacity to Vicks VapoRub. The only difference is, in my opinion, nice. It's an all natural product. It's a good product. I sell it, and it's liquid, so you can squirt it down each nostril. Makes it easy to open. It's a good airway expander, and they have directions for. The other thing I like about it is you could use it on a bird or two in a dog crate, one of those plastic ones with hardly any metal siding and venting on it. Put a blanket over it, and you could put a vaporizer up against the front of it, and you could vaporize the Vetrex into the bird's cage and get them a good dose of it that way. And that'll get down deep into the body. It could help keep it in check a little bit, but it's not going to take it away. Perfect product in its own right, has its place in the mix, just like everything else.
Is there anything you want to say to everybody so they have a better understanding of mycoplasma before we end?
It just depends on where they want to go. I think things to keep in mind. A vaccination program is not the end all. A program to eliminate mycoplasma from your flock is a journey. It will cost you money. And what I mean by that, the testing that's necessary to find out who's positive, who's negative, the lost fowl you'll have from that you're going to euthanize because of it. But it's effective. I've helped several people. I had a friend of mine here who had show birds, and they showed up positive. And we went through every bird, and he bit the bullet. He had several different breeds, and he went through, and every one that was positive, we put in a pen, and every one that was negative, we put in a different area that was cleaned up especially for them. And eventually overcame it and kept testing and eliminating, and to this day, he's still negative. So it's doable. You just have to have the time, the patience, the wherewithal to do it. Like I say, money usually drives the wagon. I don't care what color the wagon is you're driving.
It's worse when you have a lot of birds, too.
I've had somebody approach me, a good friend of mine who had a client that had what they were calling bumblefoot. He had a lot of birds, and he had them on grass and in these particular pens that he was using, and they were moving them every couple of 3 days or whatever. But about a month or so ago, maybe a month and a half, I can't remember exactly, where they were in Texas had horrendous rain. It was just soaking wet every day, just flooding, couldn't get away from it. And so he got a hold of me and he said, "Hey, starting to lose some birds, and, you got to put them down." And so they sent me some pictures of it. I said, "It's not bumblefoot, it's foot pad dermatitis." That's the precursor to bumblefoot. So what it is, it's a breakdown of the foot pad, and you'll first see it as a little black circle, maybe not totally concentric as a circle would be, but more of a circle. And then it'll break down the skin and continue. If you let it go, it will be bumblefoot. And he'd lost quite a few birds. I'll not say how many, but it was substantial. You wouldn't want to pay for them. And just by moving them to better ground that was better drained, even though it was still wet, solved the problem. And some birds we medicated to try and save some of them that weren't too far gone. But we were able to do that. And it's all about knowing your birds, watching your birds, learning all you can learn, being voracious about it. If you're really that involved with your birds, walk the yard, take that bucket, sit out there, watch them. They go downhill fast with respiratory issues because they don't have a diaphragm like you and I do. You and I at least have a little bit of a leadway. We've got something to separate the abdominal cavity from the chest cavity. They don't. So something that starts out as a little bitty problem today becomes a huge problem tomorrow, certainly 2 or 3 days afterward. So be more cognizant of it. Look at your birds, watch them, pick them up, handle them. I can't tell you how many people have said, "Well, I didn't know my birds had mites." No, because you're not paying attention. You're just not. If they're there, you pick them up, they'll be on you.
I haven't seen mites on my birds in years. Every time I pick up a bird, I'm looking. I never want to be caught off guard. Yeah.
Yeah, the same thing with coccidiosis. Learn what drives it. moisture, heat, loves it. The more you give of it, the more you're going to have of it. And the tougher time you're going to have having to keep it under control. If you keep your bedding too clean, you're still going to have a problem because its immune system depends on it to keep the bird from having it.
When the feed store send people to me
Mhm.
that need help, and I dig in deep and I ask them questions, most of the time they're having problems. They always keep their pens too clean.
Mhm. Yeah.
They're always picking them after them,
Yep.
changing the litter every day. They don't realize that they're actually making things worse.
I have others that have taken a sample dropping to a veterinarian, dog and cat guy, and I said, well, there's your problem. You got coccidiosis. And I don't want to know if they have it. I want to know how much. So the way you determine that is when you look at it under a microscope, are they too numerous to count, or are you just seeing a couple of oocysts? If the plate's full of them, yeah, we got a problem. If it's just a few of them, it's natural immunity taking place. So it's the way it's supposed to work.
Yeah.
So knowing all these things, read the bottle. It tells you when to vaccinate, tells you how to vaccinate. It tells you take the bottle out of the refrigerator. And again, if you've got any questions or anything, they can reach you, they can reach me, whichever way they want to do it. I'll help them out. You know, I sell the stuff. I've got stuff available now, both Coryza and the CRD with good dating on it. And so if you want to set up a program, get a hold of me. I'll be glad to help.
Connor's saying, I've done some research on dry pox, and what you can find, it's caused by mosquitoes. And scratching, it's not caused by mosquitoes, but it's carried by mosquitoes. Right. And they usually do look for open wounds. Right. He wants to know how to deal with it.
Well, once a bird has it, the best way to deal with it is not have it in the first place, and that's to vaccinate. Real simple. And it's a relatively cheap vaccine, what we call a wing web stab. So if you've watched your Pullurum tester pull feathers from the wing web, you're going to put your pox in the same thing, just not on that vein that he's in. You're not going to look for the vein. His vein is more up in the joint on the bone, but you're going to go in that little flap of skin there. You're going to pull out some feathers, and you're going to use the vaccine there. With that vaccine, it's a very hardy vaccine. You got a couple of hours before you got to bail out on that one. But it's simple to do, and then in 10 days, you're going to come back and examine that spot and look for a take, and you'll start to see those two spots scab over. That means the vaccine's worked. If it didn't, you either did it wrong, missed it, or the bird might even be naturally immune. It's a possibility. And I would do that on a yearly basis, whether they had pox or they didn't. Do not vaccinate birds that are showing symptoms in any way, shape, or form. So the first way you're going to see the pox symptom looks like a mosquito bite in itself. And a little whitish looking, not white, but opaquish white bumps coming up on the skin, just like they do on your skin. And they manifest themselves out as the virus starts to come out. It comes out in the form of a scab. Those scabs are loaded with virus. If that's what you've got and you want to try to alleviate that, once a day, saturate the scab with iodine. Take a Q-tip, dip it in the iodine, hold it on the scab. It's about all you can do. Keep the bird comfortable.
I'm going to let this be the last question of the day, and then we'll wrap it up. But he wanted to know whether the disadvantages of breeding in the heat. And the biggest for me is that when they're hot, like when the chicks hatch out and it's hot, they don't eat very well. They don't drink very well. They're not very active. They don't grow and develop properly. And then they're coming up when a lot of the diseases are more prevalent, the parasites. So I would say as soon as it starts getting hot, stop your breeding program. Let the hens take a break. Let them get through the molt really well. Get them in good shape for the next breeding season, and you're good to go.
Yeah, I would pretty much say the same thing for the most part. Hens are not really going to want to breed so much in this. And if you've got them that want to, so be it. But generally, we see them not wanting to do that. It's so hot. And once they're mouth breathing, they're already in trouble. And if you're allowing them to breed, that's not good. That's really not good. I would separate them at that point because they get into that situation where they're losing so much moisture that they may not be able to recover. And then you got a dead bird for no good reason at all. And as far as the chicks are concerned, I would look to put them on a water diet, give them food to eat if they want, but in their water, I would have vitamins, electrolyte product, and I like the Replimon liquid with iron. It's been a tremendous product for us, and I also like the A-Lite amino acid product concentrate. Really works well because it's almost, don't get carried away with this, but almost like having feed in the water. You've got vitamins, you've got minerals, you've got electrolytes, and you've got amino acids. You have your dry food out there for them to eat, but eating the dry food is going to be more difficult. As they eat that, they're going to produce more heat.
I try to stay as close to Mother Nature as possible. Mother Nature doesn't usually breed in the hot summer either. And
that's
so
what a molt
to
is about too. That's why as they get in there, they start molting. That's what a molt is, to let them reset and let the oviduct, which has been pumping out eggs left and right, rejuvenate and heal itself. Let them put on fresh feathers, even though they don't fly. The fresh feathers are for flying purposes back in the day, prehistoric times, basically.
Yeah, they replenish so much during the molt.
Oh yeah,
Muscle, feathers,
that's the whole object of it.
Bone, the whole bit.
Yep. That's the whole object of it.
So I would just do that. But I want to thank you for coming on the show
Sure.
and sharing your knowledge and helping people understand a little bit more about mycoplasma, because I think it's just one of those diseases that it's fairly ubiquitous, and a lot of people really don't understand how it works.
I think the smart thing to do is to embrace it. Don't run away from it. Don't ignore it and make believe it isn't there. If you got it, you got it. So what?
Be proactive.
Find out how you're going to deal with it. You don't have to depopulate unless you're in one of those states that finds out that you're positive. But by and large, you don't have to depopulate. You can learn to live with it. It's not that difficult. The smaller the flock, actually the easier it is when you think about it.
Mm-hmm.
The bigger the flock, you've got a lot of people that raise a whole lot of chickens. And you know that as well, especially in the gamefowl side of it. Personally, I don't care what they do with the chickens. That's my business. My business is fixing them.
If you're listening to us, we hope you follow our advice. If you don't like our advice, then maybe you should go somewhere else.
That's my motto. You don't like it here. What do you follow me for? Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't run into too much of that, but what I do run into is people that I guess are a little on the hard-headed side and listen to the advice, but are not willing to make that step. And unfortunately, like anything else, whether it's your personal life or whatever, unless you take those steps, things don't get better for you.
No, you got to act. You have to act. You got to learn what to do, what needs to be done, and do it. That's it. You know.
Even on the human side, it's a hard thing to do.
It's that way in life.
Life is it's different. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So thanks, Peter. I really appreciate
My
it.
pleasure.
You know, this has been really good. And I want to thank our audience for the great questions and the comments and for joining us. We'll see you guys later.
Okay, Kenny. Take care.
Okay. Thanks for listening.
Yes, thank you again for joining us on the Bred to Perfection podcast show. This show was brought to you by the Breeders Academy, where by becoming a member, you can increase your knowledge of breeding, advance your skills as a breeder, and take you and your fowl to the next level.
We can also show you how to create a strain from hybrid crosses or mongrel flocks and help you to create, maintain, and improve your present strains. We urge you to check it out. You have nothing to lose, and you can cancel anytime.
To join us at the Breeders Academy membership website, go to www.breedersacademy.com.
Best of all, I'll be there to help you every step of the way.
While you're checking out the Breeders Academy, make sure to sign up for our newsletter, The Breeders Bulletin. We provide a lot of free bonus materials and some great information that will take you and your fowl to the next level. Well, that's it for now.
We hope you join us next time for another episode of Bred to Perfection. We'll see you later.
Bye.